A slow restoration. The other tenebrae seeds recoiled from the destruction of the Fera. Now the Hex was reduced to 2 active seeds, and its situation proved desperate indeed, for the merciless order were doubtless still out there in the world. It took more than 1,000 years for the second seed to work its council of allies into positions of influence and authority. In the emerging European powers, deep beneath the more obvious surface trappings of mortal power and prestige, these companions manipulated the rise of their great empires that spread the influence of the Hex anew. My burden. On Earth, the humans were drawn to a second seed over time, came to refer themselves as the Dark Council. Each individual considered worthy enough to join with the Hex became a strong, driven leader despite their outcast status. Their power gifted to them by the Hex made them formidable indeed, linked as they were through the seed. Each member of the council was connected together on a fundamental spiritual level. By entering a trance-like state, the councillors could communicate with each other over vast distances, and through this telepathy, many came to the minds of the others. Over the centuries, it became a tenet of the Dark Council, insofar as the Hex had the need for such rules, that none brought into its fold was capable of betraying its fellows. But the Hex had never encountered a mortal such as I, Burson Carpavian. I had accomplished my scientific success in virtual anonymity in Romania, sharing them with a small circle of friends and advisers through metered correspondence. All of my grand schemes were tossed to the wind when you, my beloved wife, Veronica, fell ill, with a wasting sickness so virulent that nothing I could do could halt its progress. It was the lowest ebb, broken-hearted and despondent, that I inadvertently attracted the awareness of the Hex, an entity all too familiar with isolation and fear. Tasting my dreams, this kindred spirit reached out to touch my mind and introduce itself. Kindred. As the alien sentience reached out and made itself known to me, it revealed its own desperate troubles and offered me a chance to bond with it. With a simplistic understanding of the physical universe, the Hex could not know how much such an offer might be received by a man in my position, nor could it know that in me it met a being whose indomitable will and all-consuming passion would reshape the gift it offered into something that would change the world forever. In desperation, and half thinking it was a delusion of madness, I agreed and was drawn into the Dark Council of the Hex. I became immediately aware of the other members in Europe and elsewhere, the deeper and stronger pulses of energy and awareness flashing around the globe. I instinctively closed off his mind and fell to my knees, burdened with an intense spiking pain which threatened to overwhelm me. In that instant, I not only gained the knowledge of all that had transpired for the Hex before this moment, but I discovered that not only was I blessed with preeminent genius, but that I am also blessed with a rare brain chemistry that enabled me to close off my mind to the others in the Dark Council. I would later learn that this was a talent never seen before in a human. I had the ability to hear the thoughts of the others joined to the Hexseed in Europe, but I could reveal nothing of my own mind to them, save that which I wished to. I was now part of a larger collective, something bigger than I had been, and more far-reaching than even the Amis I corresponded with. I was part of the Dark Council of the Hex, but on my own terms. A supremely advantageous situation, I assure you. Would agree, my dear. The essence. I spent the next year learning all I could from the Hex and from the other members of the Dark Council. There was an easy familiarity among the Council due to the mental bonds that tied them together. I sensed very quickly that none of the others could isolate themselves from the Gestalt in the way that I had, nor did they realize that I had done so. I parceled out the occasional thought, the occasional scheme or secret, so that they would believe the link to be truly two-way, but I determined to keep the knowledge of the true situation to myself. I travelled all over Europe, maintaining and strengthening the protective web the hex had spun around itself, gaining the full confidence of the other members. I discovered the nature of the hexeed, and, most interestingly of all, to me, at the base of this alien geode was a huge subterranean reservoir of crimson fluid. The fluid was referred to as the essence of the hex, but other than helping fuel arcane powers, or being ingested to cause physical mutation or transformation, the potential of the fluid was largely untapped. The viscous crimson liquid was often provided to me in small doses as snuff, and seemed to invigorate my mind, but its very presence tantalized by the properties of the essence. I thought that it might hold the secret to returning you, my darling wife, to health. I spent my fiercely guarded free time studying the fluid, plumbing its mysteries and power, seeking to unlock the potential I saw in its vibrant ruby glow. And at the end of the first year, I felt the onset of crushing depression once again, after coming to the conclusion that the Dark Council and their limited knowledge of the essence could do nothing for you, my beloved Veronica. While the Dark Council continued to power play with governments in Europe, I applied my scientific mind to the very nature of the hex and its essence. I quickly became convinced that the hex itself did not comprehend the extent of its own power, and how it truly interacted with the creatures of the earth. The alien power was, in some ways, laughably naive to the darkness inherent in humanity, and how that could spark human ingenuity. I came to see links and combinations between the powers of the hex and my earlier experiments that hinted at far greater potential for this ruby essence than even the Dark Council seemed to realize. The hex could do nothing for you, but I was convinced there was something I could do to save you. Given enough time, my goal was not a small one. Once I realized the full power of the hex, I would settle for nothing short of mastery over death itself. The Tainted and the Hex Beast. I have observed that the essence of the hex can cause physical warping of creatures with prolonged exposure to it. In its captive state, when used as RJ-1027 power cells, I will explain about these later, I promise. The essence is relatively harmless. However, should it be ingested, injected, or otherwise absorbed into the body, the effect is quite different. The subject quickly exhibits the sign of hex taint. Their skin takes on an unhealthy pallor, and their emotions are heightened to an intoxicating level. The eyes of a tainted individual may also occasionally display a crimson tint that flashes and fades under certain conditions. The experience is highly addictive, but is not a true connection with the hex. Should a tainted subject be mortally wounded, there is a chance, particularly if their death is drawn out, that in their final desperate moments they will inadvertently make contact with the hex. At the crossroads of death, the most likely response to a pitiful cry for mercy or salvation is the silence of a looming void. Rarely, though, the taint within them makes a true connection to the hex, and they are infused with a new life and energy. This is a crucial moment. Only those with the strongest minds and sense of self can hold the energies in check. Should an individual have the strength of character a bond with the hex requires, they return to full health, and live to fight again. Those found wanting cannot control the energies unleashed through their being, and their flesh immediately begins to warp, their organs liquefying into volatile hex essence, and wailing pitifully, the cage of flesh stands as a mindless hex beast. Mercifully, such creatures do not live long. The essence in their bodies catalyzes quickly, and within hours or days reaches a critical mass, and they explode violently. There are tales of hex beasts that have retained a link to their former lives, or have fallen under the influence of a powerful agent of the hex, and continue to function for months, if not years, after their transmutation. But such stories are rare, and for the most of the path of a hex beast leads only to a volatile and violent death. Enlightening opportunity. My peers in the scientific community of the Ames had begun to band together into a new organization, the Covenant of the Enlightened. Ever the opportunist, I applied my genius to the aims of that new collective on the chance that they might further my goals, gaining the trust and favor of various members of the Dark Council over the 2 years. I was finally granted knowledge of the location of the European hexeed buried deep beneath a small city of Innsbruck, Austria. High in the Alps, as a member of the Enlightened, I now had the resources to act. I had been busy using my fierce intellect and will to obfuscate my intentions, trusting your brother Vlad to help me bring together a loyal coterie of fellow countrymen. I used my contacts in the Covenant of the Enlightened, like Hermann Haupt and Gustav Eiffel, to supply the machinery and expertise needed to make my plan a reality. My first act against the Hex was to break through the walls of the Schloss Ambrose, using Haupt's giant drilling machines and mechanical excavators. Once inside, your brother and his men ruthlessly dispatched the X-warped creatures guarding the site, while I focused on drilling down to the reservoir of essence beneath the Schloss, and massive hex seed that lay at its center. The roughly cylindrical geode was over 20 feet long, thick as 4 men standing cheek to jowl, and warm to the touch. The enormous opal-like mineral was placed into a stygium-lined casket before being loaded onto a purpose-built wagon. The moment the casket was sealed, the Dark Council realized something was terribly wrong. Although the gestural ability to communicate as a collective remained, their arcane connection with the Hex itself had been severed. The servants of the Dark Council arrived to reinforce the site, only to find my enlightened and the seed were already gone. All this I did in secret, even from you, my beloved. You were so sick that I did not want to worry you with the risks I was willing to take. That journey, as we absconded to the new world together, was the beginning of my new nightmarish existence, as no sooner did we arrive than you were taken from me, though death claimed you for now. I swore there and then that I would dedicate my genius to have you alive and at my side, no matter how long it took. I placed the crystalline seed at the center of my burgeoning industrial empire, spreading from the factory fortress I built in the American Wild West. From the base, I was able to utilize the Crimson Hex essence to power a raft of new technologies. To hide its origins, I branded a power source RJ-1027s and claimed that I invented it myself. On today, of all days, I hope you appreciate the meaning of those numbers, my love. Working from my stronghold, I spread this technology and the essence of the Hex over to the entire continent. A new Dark Council. Elsewhere in the New World, the final seed had not been idle these past centuries. The Nazambu, which Marie Laveau had claimed the artifact as her own power source, to rule over the denizens of the bayou as their queen. This channeling of the seed's energy was a beacon to those that had been touched by the Hex in the past. Having been hidden amongst humanity for centuries, the enigmatic shepherdess arrived at Laveau's court. With the ability to mimic the form of humanity, the shepherdess claimed to have first bonded with the Hex on the long-forgotten island of Thera. Laveau sensed within the stranger something otherworldly, yet also the touch of something familiar. While the shepherdess was certainly not human, it was evidence that she had been linked with the Hex, and through that bond, could share her ability to disguise her true form. With this gift, Laveau was able to remove amongst humanity and spread her influence, free of the revulsion that her true form would evoke in mankind. In the shepherdess, Laveau realized that she had perhaps found a true ally. The shepherdess was not alone, however, for the beast lord Carcosa Rex had answered the call of the Hex, and presented himself and his people as another ally to the Nazambu. Rex told the story of his people. They were a true inheritors of the earth, the first people created by the Great Spirit in ages past. But the Great Spirit was ashamed by Carcosa's bestial nature, and abandoned them in favor of creating humanity. Competing for resources in those early days, the human Earth usurpers hunted the Carcosa almost to extinction. Now Rex and his kind numbered less than 3 dozen, and he had heard the call of the Hex. Perhaps by joining with the others, Rex could obtain salvation for the Carcosa he had so desperately sought, and of course revenge on mankind. In these 3 individuals, the Hex found itself a new Dark Council. Contact. With the abduction and repurposing of the Tenebrae seed, the Dark Council in Europe had instantly lost their connection to the Hex. They remained politically inveigled and hugely influential, despite the physical loss of power. But their ability to trust each other and influence the Crown, Commonwealth, Imperium, and Alliance was beginning to fade. They had to track me down and reconnect with the Hex. Eventually, the Europeans learned that Lavu Rex and the Shepherdess had formed their own Dark Council, unique alliance that excluded mankind, that could not be allowed to continue. The enigmatic Third Man was dispatched as an envoy from Europe to his new Dark Council. After a meaningful display of his power, which resulted in the death of the Shepherdess, the Third Man was accepted by Rex and Lavu, and together the three of them launched a clandestine war against my fellow members of the Covenant of the Enlightened in a bid to reach me and find the stolen Hex Seed. This war did not come without terrible cost. Since the disaster at Farah, the Hex had avoided contact or conflict with the Order through maintaining a low profile, its supporters working from the shadows to establish and maintain the protection it needed. But now it is impossible for things to return to the way they were. With my distribution of RJ-1027 over an entire continent and growing conflict that might soon break out into the public consciousness, the Hex's drive to survive means that even if I can be found and dealt with, the status quo can never return. The hunters of the Order have emerged, and it is surely now only a matter of time before all-out war breaks out once more, and this world, like the 17 that went before it, may burn in starfire. The Hex clings to hope to forestall the seemingly inevitable, by seizing back from me the technologies and power I stole. Hope, then, the Hex might be able to burrow deeper into the societies of Earth. Hope at this time, unlike all those times before, the Order will not burn the Hex's adopted home to ash in an attempt to destroy it. This is the price I am willing to pay for what do I care of the world if you are not in it. Yours forever, Verse.